Right, good afternoon, everyone. I see that it is 2:15 my time, 3:15 Eastern, so I believe it's time to go ahead and get started. I just want to say thank you for joining us today. I am Sarah James. I'm the Economic Development and Planning Director for the Top of Alabama Regional Council of Governments, or TARCOG. We are located in Huntsville, Alabama, in the beautiful Tennessee River Valley region of North Alabama. I'm really excited to be here today as it's a bit of a full circle moment for me. As some of you may know, I used to work for NADO a few years back, and I planned a few of these annual training conferences in my day. So it's really cool to be a speaker, kind of be on the flip side of this event. And I just want to also take a quick moment to really applaud NADO staff in all that they do and all that they put together for these events, especially given the challenges this year has presented. They all deserve a round of applause and a true pat on the back for being able to put something like this together. Okay, pivoting to why we are all here today. Thank you again for joining a session on supporting tourism-based economies during economic downturns. Many regional development organizations, or COGs as we like to call them down here, across the country recognize the important role that tourism plays in their region, creating new and expanding existing businesses, providing both seasonal and year-round employment, contributing to the region's tax base, and many other benefits to the region's long-term sustainability and viability. Increasingly, many RDOs or COGs include tourism as a core goal area in their comprehensive economic development strategies. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that for us at TARCOG here in a minute. But the tourism industry is susceptible to ebbs and flows of the economy, as evidenced after natural disasters such as hurricanes, floods, and tornadoes, and more pertinently, as we've seen over the past 7 months with the global pandemic and how it can wreak havoc on this industry. Today's session will provide examples of ways RDOs and communities that have been engaged in the tourism sector and in some cases incorporated into their SEDS have been able to continue that work to promote the industry despite those setbacks, despite natural disasters, global pandemics, and other setbacks. Our first speaker today, I am joined by my partner in crime, I guess you could say, John Kovach, who's the executive director of the Singing River Trail, which is a multi-county trail initiative here in the Madison, Limestone, and Morgan County areas, or county of this area. And I believe, John, you might be unmuted if you want to go ahead and mute yourself if you can. I could just hear a little bit of background noise there, sorry. John will be followed by Chuck Wemple, the executive director of the Houston-Galveston Area Council, which is based in Houston. I'm excited to hear what he has to say because I actually grew up in Houston. My family's still there. And HGAC houses the Gulf Coast Economic Development District, an EDA-funded district that serves the surrounding 13-county region of Houston. Melissa Levy, principal and owner of Community Roots, a nonprofit organization based in Hinesburg, Vermont, will be our final speaker. And I'm really excited that she is here as well because she is also a former NADO employee. We never worked together while we were at NADO, but it's nice to have her join us today, and I'm sure she can share a bit about her time with NADO as well. In the interest of time, we will go ahead and start the session. Please note that there will be a bit at the end of the session for Q&A. So if you have any questions as we're talking, please feel free to type those into the chat box, and I believe a NADO staff member will be collecting those, and we'll get to them at the end. So as mentioned, I'm going to kind of give a broad overview of TARCOG's role in the Singing River Trail, and then I will kick it to John Kovach, who's the new executive director of that trail. So I believe we had my slides up on the screen a minute ago. Sorry about that. Sorry for the confusion. And I guess I will need control access, I believe. Do I have it? Let's see. Click here. And do I have control? If not, you might.
Looks like you have control now, Sarah.
Okay, let's see about that. Perfect. Okay. So just a quick little bit about the top of Alabama Regional Council of Governments. We serve a 5-county region, including 46 municipalities up in the northeastern corner of Alabama. I like to show this slide when I talk about our work, because I really see that TARCOG has two sides, as many of us do. We are the Area Agency on Aging, which you'll see on the left side of your screen. All of the amazing comprehensive services we provide aging and individuals and seniors in our region. And then on the right side of the screen is my area of expertise, and that is the economic development and planning services that we provide as the Economic Development District and the Local Development District and the Regional Planning Organization, or RPO, for the region. So I just like to show that. I think it's a great visual representation of many of the different projects that we support and we provide. As you'll see on the screen, there are 12 of us in the state of Alabama, and I wanted to note that that specifically because the Singing River Trail, as I mentioned, is really focused on Limestone, Madison counties in our region, and then also Morgan County, which is the home of Decatur, Alabama, in NARCOG's region, our sister agency to our west. And I just wanted to highlight that this is a multi-COG or multi-RDO partnership and collaborative effort that it just extends the boundaries of one specific region. And so we're really excited that we're able to strengthen our partnership with our sister agencies and promote this type of regional collaboration. Let's see if my, So obviously I mentioned tourism is a critical piece, a very important piece to our economic development. And it is a priority in our comprehensive economic development strategy. And I might be a little biased, but I feel like we are blessed with so many amazing natural assets and cultural assets in our region. As you can see from the slide, I know it's a little hectic, but within our 5 counties, here in Huntsville, we are home to the U.S. Space and Rocket Center. And this was a slide I put together for a presentation I did over there to show kind of that those that come to visit the Space Center, there are a plethora of other activities and other tourist destinations that those visitors could also see in our region while they are here. Some of you may know the Space and Rocket Center is the state of Alabama's premier tourist destination. Year in, year out, it gets the most tourists. I think it's something like over 1 million tourists a year. Obviously not this year with the setback with the pandemic, but if we're bringing all of those people from all across the country, even internationally, to come visit the Space Center and go to Space Camp, how do we get them to stay in the region and maybe go out and hit some trails out in DeKalb County over by Little River Canyon National Preserve, or stay in town, stay over in Madison and go check out a Trash Pandas baseball games, our new minor league baseball team, or go down to Cathedral Caverns and go explore all of the different caves we have in our region with our great hills, or our quaint and historic Main Street towns like Elkmont and Gunnersville. Lake Gunnersville is also the largest lake in the state of Alabama. So you can see that we have just an amazing array of tourist assets. And so something like the Singing River Trail is an attempt to really connect key assets and really drive people to these places to visit and drive those tourism dollars in those directions. Really quickly, so while TARCOG serves that 5-county region, Launch 2035 was kind of a separate effort, a TARCOG supported effort to really focus on the growth that was happening in and around Huntsville. So as you all may know, Huntsville has Redstone Arsenal, which has been expanding recently. We've also been blessed with a lot of great investment in automotive manufacturing and rocket dynamics and research and development and the rocket industry and things like that. So we've been experiencing immense growth. And so I think that there was this moment where all kind of the core stakeholders involved in different things related to economic development and growth kind of got together and said, we kind of need to get our arms around this. and really focus on looking at how these 3 counties are going to be impacted by that growth. And because we have such low commute times across North Alabama, Redstone Arsenal pulls a commuting workforce from all of those counties you see on the screen. And so you can see that there is a big economic impact in this area based on that. And so Launch 2035 brought business owners together alongside local elected officials, community foundations and community organizations, TARCOG and other regional economic development entities all got together to really make sure that we were all on the same page and kind of driving in the same direction. Our former executive director, Nancy Robertson, was very involved in that process from its inception, and she actually chaired a committee. So they decided in Launch 2035, they decided to focus on 3 core focus areas, and that is workforce development, entrepreneurship, and then land use. And so Nancy chaired the land use committee, which is where Singing River Trail was developed out of. And so when we started to talk about this multi-county, multimodal trail, everyone was on board, because you've seen the success of things like this, like the Atlanta Beltline, or in others around the country. And so we wanted to make sure that we were all on the same page, and everyone that participated really got on board. It's been such a very collaborative effort, and that's evidenced by the fact that the master plan process was entirely locally funded. So everyone came to the table and kind of put a piece in, kind of provided what they could in terms of donations or time or other resources to really get this off the ground. And I'm going to try to go a little faster, because I know that I want to make sure John gets on these details. So this is the Singing River Trail as it has been master planned. It connects Huntsville, Decatur, and Athens through Madison, and I'll let John go into a little bit more detail. But really, that's kind of where I want to stop. I just kind of wanted to preface John's remarks with the fact that TARCOG has been a core partner in this kind of separate regional initiative, and then that the collaboration has been so strong. And we've really wanted to solidify that partnership even further recently. And so we found a way to set aside $100,000 of our revolving loan fund money to specifically set it aside for businesses that will locate along the trail should they need loan assistance. So we have kind of a set pot of funding for small businesses. It could be, the kayak company or a bike, company, or even a grocer or a restaurant that wants to locate along the trail and needs a little bit of startup capital. We're excited that we're able to kind of carve out that funding in our RLF. But at this point, I will kick it to John, and I welcome any questions or any opportunity for my peers to connect with me and learn more about TARCOG's involvement in the Singing River Trail. John, are you there?
I am here.
Awesome, great.
All right, well, thank you, Sarah. And as she referred to me, her partner in crime, Sarah and I didn't know each other until I was hired on July 22nd. And from this point forward, I feel like TARCOG has been kind of I had to kind of see it in my soup almost now, because I work with it so much. So I really do appreciate the idea of regional collaboration. And Sarah has been great, because I think it's the best of all worlds, that public and private and quasi-public and quasi-private all coming together. So again, let me introduce myself. My name is Dr. John Kovach, and for me, I am a brand new executive director of the Singing River Trail, and my background wouldn't really maybe hint at what I was going to do. I was a professor of Southern history for the past almost 20 years, and did a lot of work in historic preservation, public history, museum studies, was a park ranger for the National Park Service for 5 years along the Sino Canal, which was a 184.5-mile trail along the Potomac River. And I think for me, after getting tenure and all the things you're supposed to do in academia, I realized there was something more. And when the opportunity presented itself for me to become a part of the Singing River Trail, I jumped on it. And so for me, let me kind of give you my background of what I think makes this trail important, because I think for me, as I begin to enter into a new challenge, I think what I see is I could build a 70-mile greenway trail system that connects Athens, Alabama to Decatur, which is along the Tennessee River, Mooresville, which is a town of 56 people, not 56,000 or 5,500, but 56 people. Triana, Huntsville, Madison, and Gunnersville is probably going to join in on the trail as well, which is a river town along the Tennessee River. If I just had said, okay, listen, in the next 10 to 15 years, I'm going to build a 70-mile trail, I think everyone would be happy with that. But the more I began to look at trails, the more I began to look at regional connectivity, and the more I began to learn about the mission statement of organizations like TARCOG and NARCOG, and just kind of the overall spirit of let's get something bigger done than just this trail, I really kind of began to think about it in terms of a post-COVID response to, I think, where in some areas, maybe this is where it's helpful to be a historian, is seeing a longer story, a longer use than just the trail. So I'm going to give you a couple tenets that I'm working from and wrap those up and kind of give you an idea of the holistic approach that I really want to take with this. So to begin with, for me, I think the first part of this is that this trail serves as, I think it's pretty easy to figure out health and wellness, but I don't want to just stop at what most people think of when I talk about health and wellness, and that is physical health and wellness. I think there's also an important part of this that right now, especially in these days of COVID and pandemics and contested elections and just general angry people. For me, health and wellness also includes emotional and mental health and wellness. And I think this is an important part of what we need to focus on. I think it's important to understand that a trail, a 70-mile trail, isn't just about running, walking, biking, e-biking, but it's also about getting back to nature. It's also getting outside. It's also about something as simple as vitamin D, but it's also something as complex as finding yourself in a world where it may feel out of control. Being able to find yourself along the Singing River Trail is really my mantra that I've been working on. And in fact, the reason you're not seeing me right now, I'm kind of bummed, is so I decided to get fancy, is I'm actually sitting next to the Tennessee River right now, and I was going to do my call on video with the Tennessee River, and my Singing River Trail, where it'll eventually go, is behind me. So I apologize that you can't see me right now, but I really wanted to show you that tourism and emotional and mental health, if you all saw what's behind me, I think it made you feel better just by seeing blue skies and blue water. So that's really the first part that I wanted to focus on. The second part that I wanted to focus on, and this might come back from my educational background, is I think it's important that we become an educational leader, an educational center. And I think it's important to caveat that and say, typically, I think, it'd be easy to say, well, I need outdoor classrooms, and I want online curriculums and lesson plans, and I want to get buses out here, and I want to do all those things that are traditional in terms of education in say a park or a greenway. But for me, I think there's also another component to this, and that is I want to create a world-class educational component to this, because I think it's important that people can learn, traditional students can learn from our assets that we have, our mountains, our lakes, our rivers, each other. And I think that's a part of it that I want to focus on. But there's also another part of this, and that is something that's a little bit less maybe tangible, and that is lifelong learners, questers, people who want to continue to live life, not just in their job and going to bed, and their job and going to bed, but that want to learn more about the world around us, more about the world that they occupy. And so for me, I think education also includes those people, that we have to become an asset for people who are feeling cooped up, for people who are feeling concerned, or who are feeling unsettled, or feeling insecure, or underrepresented. That I know it sounds kind of kumbaya, but I think there's something to be said about getting outdoors with each other. And what you find is that most people have more in common than less. And I think by becoming a place where people want to come and learn is an important part of this. And I think let me just kind of loop back and give you one more example of what I think we could do. I think it's easy to say to a group of fifth graders, hey, go out and save the world. practice good environmental, stewardship and whatever, and that's great. But my question to you, and maybe this is devil's advocate in me, is how do you tell a child to save the world if they can't even tell you the difference between a pine tree and an oak tree? So for me is, why don't we get back to the beginning, and why don't we do things like flora and fauna? Why don't we do things like bird watching and listening? Why don't we do things like taking science and using it and understanding why science is important? It's not subjective. That there's a part of me as an educator that wants you to see things in gray, not black and white. And so when I, as a Southern historian, when I taught at the University of Alabama in Huntsville, for me, it really was about the idea of you seeing people in multifaceted ways, and you seeing things in multifaceted ways. And I want this to be a part of our trail. The last part of this, and probably the most compelling part for our stakeholders, is I want this to become an economic driver. I want this to become a place where people could come and make something other than, say, outside and fun and education and recreation. But every group I go to, I remind them about something. I have 70 miles of incubator space. So I want to encourage, in every group that I go speak to, I talk about personal entrepreneurship and collective enterprise. How can I help you as a person? How can I help you as a community? How can I help make you, I don't care if you want to use the word rich. I know we're not supposed to talk about people getting, if I can make you rich on the Singing River Trail, I would love to. If I could help you become the person that you want to become, if I can help you find your version of the American dream, whatever that looks like, be it a white picket fence or a nomadic life, it's not for me to judge. It's not for me to say. It's for me to help create a platform that allows you to find yourself. And so what I really want to do from the economic part of this is become a linear chamber of commerce for 70 miles of North Alabama, that connectivity matters. And I'll give you a couple examples of this. One is we don't really have a river culture here, despite having the Tennessee River run right through North Alabama. We're called the Tennessee River Valley. TVA is a big part of what we do. Is that for me, it's a massively underutilized part of who we are and what we do. I did a 30-mile boat trip this past Saturday on the Tennessee River from 6:30 a.m. to almost 4 p.m. and I passed two recreational boats during that entire time. So what if we were to build floating platforms where you could go kayaking and then you could camp on the platform? What if I told you that if you're a landowner and the trail's going through your farm, that I have a private outfitter who will that will pay a usage fee to go fishing in your pond or your private water? It's catch and release. They pay you a fee. Can I help you keep that land and your family longer because you're not beholden to just row crops? So in reality, trying to represent as many people as possible. And I think there's a key component to this too, and that's recognizing spatially that with tourism, it's not just about the dots on the map, it's about the space between the dots. And so I could focus on Athens, Decatur, Mooresville, Triana, Madison, and Huntsville, and not think about the space between those dots. Or I could also go out, and this is something I've been doing, is meeting with farming groups, meeting with the Farm Federation of Alabama, meeting with people that have felt disconnected from a virtual world, from an entrepreneurial world, who feel disconnected from the dots that are on the map because they're the space between the dots. And I've talked a lot about rural enterprise and engaging, especially with rural broadband becoming more prevalent in Alabama, being able to engage farmers, being able to engage rural residents to think about how can you take part of the Singing River Trail? How can you make it yours? When we go through your space, your place, where your history is from, what do we do to make a place that's yours? What do we do to let people see your story? And this is something I think is very important. I don't want to tell your story. I want to amplify your story. And this might be the historian in me coming out, but I don't want to I don't want to be a parrot. I'm not here to parrot other people. I'm here to help you find your voice if that's what's needed, help you amplify your voice if that's what you need. And then if you want to try to make money, if you want to try to benefit, if you just want it because you like and enjoy a greenway, those are the things that I really want to try to enable. And so for me, I have this is my first. I'm on my first 60 days. Just finished up here, and I sent out an engagement report, and I was very pleased because I tried to hit the ground running. And when I put together my engagement report, in the first 60 days, I had 183 meetings. And so for me, what it really came down to was I went on a talking tour, but I think more importantly, especially in this day and age in politics and 24-hour news cycles, I also went on a listening tour, and I tried to listen as much as possible. And so the traditional African-American community down by the river that's never felt particularly engaged with any part of anything in Madison County, I had a meeting with one of the representatives. And so this is a town called Triana. It was a town that after the Civil War, a lot of freedmen, ex-slaves, actually settled down into and became a thriving port town for a while. So upstream, or downstream, I should say, just downstream is the town of Mooresville, which has typically been the town of masters and enslavers. And so before the Civil War, obviously, and became the place of old antebellum homes and just everything you would want to see if you wanted to have a little downtown tour and feel good about it. So when I met with both groups, I made a suggestion that both groups had a hard time wrapping their head around. I went to Triana, your traditional African-American town, and I went to Mooresville, your traditional quaint antebellum mansion town. And I suggested that they both start a sister city program, and I didn't tell them what or how or why, and both kind of took the bait and bit and said, well, we're too small, I don't know, there's not a place in Europe or Asia or Africa that would really match us. So why do you care if we have a sister city program? And my response to them was, well, why don't you become sister cities with the town right next to you? Why doesn't Mooresville become the sister city of Triana? And why doesn't Triana become the sister city of Mooresville? And their answers of both towns was kind of the same, which is like, why? I said, because you don't know each other. You live and work 12 miles from each other on the river, and you don't know each other. You don't walk each other's streets. You don't work with each other. So how can we facilitate more connectivity and more interaction? And so when I spoke to both towns, the Singing River Trail becomes the glue. It becomes the bind. It becomes the aggregate that allows people to start talking. And this is where I think we are in this country. And I can say this, and I'll get on my soapbox, and you can put me on mute. But this is where we are in this country: is we stop listening to each other. We speak and we scream at each other, but we don't listen anymore. And so part of me is I'm using my bully pulpit of the Singing River Trail to hopefully bring people together, connect places and things and people and ideas, let people know that education is the true opportunity, reading is an opportunity, understanding is an opportunity, that recreation is for everyone, that the Singing River Trail will be for everyone. And it's important to me that the Singing River Trail becomes a universal trail. I don't care if you're able-bodied. I don't care if you're a person with a disability. I don't want to just clamp down and say there's only one kind of disability that we typically think of wheelchairs. I want the person who doesn't have vision to be able to enjoy the trail as much as the person who does. Same with any other disability. And so for me, this is where I have 70 miles to inspire people to think. And so I've already talked to one group about, let's start a sensory trail. Let's start a part of the trail. Let's do 1 acre of senses on the Singing River Trail. So when I talk about history, when I used to teach about what did 1860s New York City smell like? What did it sound like? What did it feel like? In fact, I'll tell you this, and I did a lot of work at the National Archives in the coal mines of southern West Virginia in a place called Matewan, is you could even say, what does history taste like? And I think for me, those are the attributes and values that I'm bringing to this project. And with Sarah, as a partner in crime, it's just been fantastic because it's allowed me to really engage TARCOG in a way that they're the institution with the regional reach and approach and everything else. And so for me to be able to immediately tap into that. So when I finished my public announcement on the 22nd of July, Sarah came right up to me with Michelle Jordan, her boss, and I could kind of see in both eyes that I think I had a partner in crime, and I think I had a partner that this is going to work. And I'll end with this: is after 60 plus days, I did make a rule, and I will tell you my rule, and that is everywhere I went, people kept saying, if this works. So after about day 40, day 50, I have officially outlawed the use of the word if when referring to the Singing River Trail. And if you do, we will find a way of punishing you. I haven't figured it out yet, but it's when. And I think that's the spirit we have to work forward as a country, as a region, as a state, as a county, as a city, as a person, is let's look forward. Let's get this done. Let's have fun doing this. Let's not take ourselves overly serious. Let's do this with passion, but the passion is real. Because I think people smell authenticity, and this is the part that excites me most. Is this is what I do when I wake up, and this is really what I do in the evening, and this is what I do on the weekends, and I wouldn't have it any other way. So with that being said, I don't want to take up all the time. I know there's other people talking, but I just wanted to present my story. And again, I'm sorry you can't see me, and I look forward to talking to any of you or all of you that want to talk about Singing River Trail. So thank you.
Thank you, John, for that, and I really appreciate it. We've been trying to scroll around on the Singing River Trail website and show people a bit, but it was getting a little bit of a delay. So thank you very much. Next up, we'll hear from Chuck Wemple with Houston Galveston Area Council.
All right. Good afternoon, everybody. Get the webcam going here. Don't have a PowerPoint presentation today. I did have one slide to put up that does show the Houston Galveston Area Council region. Not sure if we have that available. Carrie?
Yep, we're bringing that up now. Thank you.
Great. If we could just put that in presentation mode. So there we go. Perfect. All right. So good afternoon, everybody. I'm Chuck Wemple. I'm the Executive Director at the Houston Galveston Area Council of Governments. And we are located on the upper Texas coast. The darker shaded part of the map shows the 13 counties that comprise our region along the coast. And that lighter shaded area to the lower right is the Gulf of Mexico, and that's Galveston Bay that kind of comes up off the coast. And so I'm not going to have a lot of PowerPoint for you today. I want to talk a bit, maybe pose a few questions as well too for you as audience members and for fellow presenters. I'd like to make sure we have some time to perhaps interact with each other with some Q&A amongst the panelists and also with those of you who are tuning in. So unlike some of my colleagues, our region doesn't have large vistas or dramatic views. We're pretty flat topographically, a lot of rain. We do have some coastline, we do have some coastal prairie, we do have some piney wood forest, we have some really nice assets that are out there, but they're kind of far flung from our major population center. And so when I was working on economic development in an earlier position at the Houston Galveston Area Council, as I would go around and meet with various chambers of commerce, Rotary clubs, whatever might need a lunchtime speaker. We all know how that can go when you're out in your region. I would always ask what in the area would draw people in for tourism, and I would kind of hear the same thing from a lot of people. Well, we have birds, we have some festivals, and that's usually about it. Maybe a little bit of scenic beauty to look at, but nothing really organized, and nothing that might draw somebody in from another part of the country or even from across the region to get out there. There seemed to be a general lack of specificity. Do you have birds, or do you have a special type of split tail kite, or certain species of woodpecker that people want to come see that might draw someone in, a certain type of pelican, for example, as opposed to a more generic bird? And we started to explore what was unique about different parts of our region to kind of get a feel for what we might be able to weave together. And that didn't have a lot of traction behind it. And then we got hit by Hurricane Ike about a little over 10 years ago. And that allowed us to rethink the economy in our rural coastal areas, because they were very hard hit by rural the agriculture industry, some of the vacation home areas hard hit. And so we thought, what if we took a look at coastal tourism along our region as at least an additional piece of a growing economy and a recovery economy? And we worked with the International Economic Development Council, had them come in. They brought some volunteers from different parts of the country. We took them on a big tour. That map on that slide is a very large area. It can take 2.5 hours to get across without traffic. Very, very, very large. And they kind of confirmed what we already knew, that our best nature assets were really nice and really surprising in their quality, but it took forever to get there. And if we had them leave from Houston, it could take 2.5 hours to get there. And when they got there, there weren't any amenities. There was really no area for them to have a nice lunch or to even consider staying the night in a hotel, anything like that. So we found ourselves with great assets far flung from our population centers, and decided that it was time to think about adding amenities out into those parts of our region. About this same time, a couple other groups got involved from the Houston area and had similar ideas. We should have a regional tourism brand, we should have a regional tourism approach. And there was a lot of planning done, but not much implementing. And so what happened is there were fair numbers of years where there was a lot of talk and a lot of thinking and what ifs, and maybe we could even do a national recreation designation that might help bring some federal funding in, all sorts of grand ideas, which are common out there in the world, but not much on the specific implementation. And so a big lesson learned for us was, if we could create a small community enhancement grant program, or even a tourism grant program in the future, that focused on funding just a few small amenities in key locations to start to build up the awareness and the experience for those levels, that could go a long way. And so as we now come upon post-COVID, and people again start to talk about, well, what's tourism going to like? What's the future of tourism? Hey, we should do a regional plan. I kind of pause, because we've done that a few times, and I'm not a huge fan of just recreating and revising a plan without having some direct implementation that can come with that. It's also important to know that those large regional efforts didn't have strong connection in the communities that were going to be part of that tourism network. The previous speaker talked about going out and engaging communities, working with the individuals. There has to be authentic engagement, as was talked about earlier, for the community to really have buy-in. And if that's missing, then a lot of these efforts aren't going to happen. So we've learned a lot through our own efforts, through watching others as well too. We found out that we have a lot of interesting things that we don't really capitalize on. We have a fair amount of pirate culture along our coast, rarely talked about. We have a ton of alligators, a lot of other large animals that are a bit of a draw. One of our small communities is home of Texas Gator Fest. That community brings in 25% of its sales tax revenue in a long weekend. But again, those things are all vulnerable, right? The first time Gator Fest got canceled and its companion event, Rice Fest for the rice grain, not nearly as attractive as the gator versus the rice grain, but nonetheless important community festivals. Once those were canceled after major hurricanes and then canceled after major flooding events, they weakened. And the people who were involved with them moved on to other things, possibly retired. And now we're in a new situation with COVID where we're not even sure if festivals are going to be one of the first things to come back tourism-wide. It might be a getaway to a nature location. It might be off the beaten path areas, and not so much the large festival, the crowded space, the indoor sporting event. Those things are probably going to come along later with COVID. So for us, we learned a lot. We found out that the tolerance for most people in Houston is about an hour outside of Houston to really get there. Unless there's a great reason to go and stay, then you got about an hour for that day trip. That's huge opportunities for our small towns that we're working on a revitalization program at the Houston Galveston Area Council to help them become more of a draw. Someone wants to get out of town, get a little fresh air, get away from the rush of the city. They can go to one of our small towns, perhaps stay at a bed and breakfast, or take an RV, which we think is going to be huge in the future for our region as well too. These are kind of standard approaches, I'm sure that a lot of you are familiar with, but a few things that we're wondering about, and I wonder if you are too, is could we be seeing post-COVID a new opportunity for community experience? So not so much the world of wonder draw, the major amusement park type of draw, but really people who are seeking to take a trip, get away, and have a community experience, maybe go to those less traveled, less crowded places. The staycation might take on a whole new meaning for a large populated area like Houston. And that type of activity, when we look in our own backyard for tourism, for local experience and local tourism, and for visitors that come into the region to go experience and to maybe gain a reputation for that, that can maybe balance out some of the other effects of tourism. It could round out some economies by adding a tourism component. But I think something else that is very common to fall into is the belief that tourism is an unalloyed good, that's only good and not potentially a strain on a community or have downsides. And I think we certainly see even in our own area, our beaches in Galveston, for example, once people started opening up certain parts of the state and the beaches were open, people flooded just to get out of their houses and for being cooped up. And the amount of trash left on the beach and the amount of disrespect was pretty amazing in its scope. And it was continuous throughout that process too. I only bring that up to say that we need to think about responsible tourism and what those impacts can be on communities. So as we look to our service, to our members in our region, we need to have a balanced approach to it, and it can't just be the big draw. What if a great place to visit was also a great place to live, to where you didn't just want to go there to hang out and walk on the beach, or to go to a trail in the woods, or to go see some special historic site or experience a bit of recreation? But what if it was also a great place to live? And I think that is something that gets overlooked so often. But I think if we focus on the experience being someone travels to an area and they not only have a great time, but they say, wouldn't it be great to live here? That's a huge way of looking at integrating community development with tourism as well too. A couple other efforts real quickly. We're working on a regional framework for conservation of natural areas. There's certainly a flood mitigation component to that, but also a natural area and tourism component as well. We'll have more to come on that in the next year or so. And when I mentioned the community experience, I think back to a show I was watching on TV, and my mind's been so full lately, like a lot of yours, I'm sure, that I can't remember exactly where it was at. I'll have to go find it. But one thing that made me want to go visit, of all these towns that had interesting bakeries, the one I really wanted to go visit was the one that had a community pizza night at the bakery on Wednesdays. And what it was is the community would welcome anyone who came. You show up with your own toppings, and they roll out the pizza and they cook it, and you all sit around a big family style table and eat. And the draw was, what a great place that would be to go visit, and what a great place that would be to go live. And so I leave you with those thoughts. Not a lot of specifics on tourism places. There's a lot of assets in Houston. We could go on about that for quite a while. But I wanted to offer those up to see if we could have some conversation with the audience and panelists as well too. And with that, I'll complete my remarks. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chuck. That was terrific. Next, we'll hear from Melissa Levy. I hope I'm saying your last name correctly. but I believe you should gain access here in just a moment.
Yes, it's Melissa Levy. Yeah, I'm based in Heinsberg, Vermont. I do rural economic development consulting. I did used to work for NADO a long time ago and have been to many annual training conferences. And actually, the way I moved to Vermont was as a tourist. You know, I really had been there and really liked it, and that's how I came to move to Vermont from Washington, D.C. So I'm really glad to be here. Thank you, NATO, for having me, my old friends. And I know we want to save time for questions, so I'm gonna try to get this moving. There it goes, sorry. So I wanted to share a little bit about WealthWorks, because this is a framework that I do use when I work with tourism communities in different places. I'm working with 3 different areas right now around tourism. This is an approach for doing economic development differently. These are some of the key principles. So building on and creating multiple forms of wealth, making sure that wealth stays local, and improving livelihoods. And I wanted, I've heard from the past 3 folks talking about assets, which is fantastic, because that's what I wanted to kind of talk about before I get into an example of one of the communities I'm working with who's been really successful in kind of tourism planning and development. So I was hoping for you guys to I guess we can put them in the question box, or positive assets in your community. So what would land your community on a top 10 places to visit list?
So this is Carrie, and I've just put a link to a Google Doc where folks can type in together and see what each other are seeing as like a short little interactive exercise.
Perfect.
So Rachel's bringing that up online, and folks can find the link in the chat in the questions box.
Fantastic, and I'll start. So I live in Heinsberg, Vermont. It's a community of about 4,500 people, and I'm not a mountain biker, but if I were, Heinsberg would be a real destination for mountain biking. We have a whole network of mountain biking trails in our town forest. People come from all over to do that. So, thanks, Carrie. So yeah, and I heard from the previous examples, you know, certainly the Galveston area has the coast. That is a big tourism asset. And the Singing River Trail is another that we heard about also. So I'm gonna give you guys a minute to just put anything in about assets in your areas. Thanks. I see a historic downtown, a walkable historic downtown for Carrie. And I guess maybe people are, it's eventually happening. Okay. We won't spend too much time. I do want to leave time for people to ask questions, but see, harvesting oysters on a vintage barge in Texas. Oh, people are, yeah. It's great to talk about assets in different places because it's fun. NASCAR track in South Carolina. Scenic views, trails, hiking in Huntsville. One of 7 wonders of Oregon. I love Oregon. I have family out there. Great. So you guys get it. I mean, a lot of these, and as I'm looking at these, you know, there's certainly natural assets. There's also some built assets, you know, the NASCAR track and the historic downtown. And all of these make up the assets of the communities that we're working in. So I also see some cultural assets, natural assets. Great. This is fantastic. So you get it. I don't need to school you guys in assets. So can we, let's see, go back to the presentation? So I wanted to share just different kinds of assets. If you were in Barbara's session previous to this one, you're already familiar, thank you, with the 8 forms of capital. And we were just talking about a couple of those, which were natural. We were talking about built capital and cultural capital. Sorry, having trouble maneuvering this. Oh, there we go. Oh. Okay. So here are the 8 forms of capital. I'm not going to read these to you. You're probably familiar with them, especially if you've been hanging around NADO for a while. So, but a lot of these go into making a tourism community successful. Certainly natural and built and cultural are kind of the assets that people come to see, but you need some of these other things like individual capital and social capital to actually make things happen. So I'm going to talk to you about Letchworth Gateway Villages. I'm working in the Genesee Valley in New York, which is west of Western New York, and it's just south of Rochester. This is it's focused around a state park, which is Letchworth State Park. And I was there when I was in my 20s. It's called the Grand Canyon of the East, and it has in the past, let's see, in 2015, it was named the best state park in the US out of about 6,000 state parks. And in 2017, it was named the best attraction in New York State. So this was an amazing asset that these folks had to work with. So I worked with them and we talked about assets. They already had a lot of great assets. You can see on here that they had a lot of natural assets, they had some cultural assets, built assets, and I'm sure a lot of your places have these same assets. So, and then, we really started to think about, how do we, what kinds of partners do we need to make this really happen? And so we use this concept of value chains, which is a network of people, businesses, organizations, and agencies working collaboratively to meet a market demand opportunity. And the market demand opportunity is recreation. So we worked together, and this is a great exercise because it really builds capacity moving forward. So we built out who are the key players in our value chain. So the core partners are really the people that are actually touching the tourists and recreationists. The support partners are those supporting those core partners. And then the gateway points are really where supply meets demand. And so you can see that these are like aggregators of demand where tourists and recreationists are coming together. And here is the value chain that we came up with. You can see the different players, and what we did is we figured out what the gaps were, and those are the pieces that are outlined. So you can kind of see these outlines here, and then we prioritize those gaps, and those are the ones with the red dots. So trail connectivity. We were working on transportation, on interpretation, marketing, and that's where we developed some working groups to actually start to move these things forward. It's been really great. It started, Letchworth Gateway Villages started with 3 communities, and since I've been engaged with them, it's expanded to 5 counties now, where we're networking, we're providing support for entrepreneurs and strategies. This is kind of a framework that we've been using. The ultimate goal is to create an outdoor recreation destination. We have these key gaps and strategic priorities that we're working on, and we developed some working groups, and we've been working with folks and partners around their individual interests, which has been great. And people are engaged. There's some really interesting milestones to share. They have become a 501c3 now. Their team and network of collaborators has grown. We had a meeting with like 80 people, which was a little bit raucous, but that shows this, to me, that shows the strength of, you know, what people are excited about. They have this great asset to build on, and there's a lot of potential. I think with COVID, these, you know, people want to go to those off the beaten path places. So I think that there's a lot of opportunity for all of our communities to build on those assets. And anyway, back to these milestones. There's some investment happening. There's this regional identity. This is kind of a map so you can see where we're talking about. These are 5 counties with 800,000 visitors annually, and quite a bit of spending happening. There's a ton of really interesting natural assets, and the area is close to Rochester and Buffalo, so it's got some young populations to bring in. Let's see. Oh, these are a couple of components of the work that's been happening. Growing food tourism, so really supporting the connection of farmers to restaurants and building on that interest in food tourism. Digital Main Street is a really interesting program where this collaborative is working with an organization in Canada, and they're getting the tools they need to support their local businesses and getting them online, which is even more important now, you know, that we're in this COVID kind of era where people, you know, are doing a lot of things online and learning about things online and purchasing online. So that is supporting those businesses in becoming more digital. There's also a great website. It's called Explore Genesee Valley. It's like a map guide, and the great thing about this is that it's built out from people in the region. So it's a tool. It's a tool to create a shared identity. The businesses and residents and organizations can add to this amazing website. So you can see that there's lots of entries, there's businesses, attractions, there are itineraries and events being promoted, and, you know, great photos of all of the interesting things you can do. This has really just exploded. Thanks, Carrie, for posting that. It's a great website. I'd check it out. So this has all led to improved visibility for all these businesses and attractions across those 5 counties. Direct technical assistance to 330 businesses and 11 communities in Livingston and 4 communities in Wyoming County. New businesses are starting up because they're seeing the potential of all of this. There's some new transportation ideas, some new lodging opportunities. There's folks that will help you get engaged with the natural assets. There's been a lot of investment. So that is, and just, yeah, here's more in terms of the businesses getting engaged in online kind of endeavors, is that there are more and more businesses that have been verified on Google, and those are tourism related businesses. So anyway, I know we're toward the end of our time, but I wanted to, I know I kind of rushed through that because I know we wanted to have a little discussion and questions. So this is me. If you have more questions or want to chat about tourism, I'm happy to do it. But otherwise, I'm happy to just open it up.
Well, great. Thank you so much, Melissa. That was wonderful. And I love the community-based approach and that grassroots effort. It has to come from the community if it's going to be successful. I would love if all of our speakers that are able to do so would turn on their cameras and we can ask a couple quick questions. I know we are tight on time, so I thank you for going so quickly. Looks like we have a couple here. I hope John is still on the line. John, are you still there?
Yes, I'm still here.
Oh, perfect. Okay, so we had a question about the implementation of the Singing River Trail. And, you know, I did mention that we had such incredible stakeholder participation and support in the development of the trail and kind of the master planning process. Can you speak to how we're keeping stakeholders engaged in the actual implementation and getting actual trail on the ground?
Yeah, in fact, yesterday I had a meeting with a landowner who's doing a huge development in South Huntsville, and he made a challenge to me if I could help him find certain materials he needed for his trail, his internal trail. He would donate 7 miles of trail to the Singing River Trail, and so in reality, what's happening is by being so kind of public facing, so public oriented, I'm having people find me and say, how do I get on the Singing River Trail? So right now it's really just trying to engage as many of those people as possible before we even get to land use, landowners, and things like that. So keep the ball rolling, keep the ball moving forward, and I think that so far is won the day.
Great. It looks like we had a follow-on question. What was the timeline from here's the idea of the Singing River Trail to where we are now? And I think you might be able to answer that better than I can. It's when did the master plan start?
Master plan started 3 years ago, or 4 years ago, and the master plan was published July of 2019. And when they published it, they actually put out kind of an internal, this should trigger an executive director, and I was hired July 2020. So 1 year almost to the day.
Awesome. Great. Looks like we have a question for Melissa. How did you decide which businesses to verify on Google?
Oh, I don't think I can answer that. You know, there's the woman who's coordinating this value chain, Nicole Manopel. She is a great resource. And I apologize. I'm not on the ground, unfortunately. I'm just supporting the kind of coordination of it. Yeah, sorry about that.
No worries. And I have a question to pose to myself. You know, Chuck was asking a little bit more about the revolving loan fund piece to this. And it's a bit hard to answer at this point as well because we haven't made any loans yet. But he was asking about how we're looking at the underwriting of those loans and if we're anticipating a high default rate. And I think it's going to be very aligned to our regular revolving loan fund program and just kind of sectioning it off to those businesses along the trail. It can be dicey. We usually like to try to couple our loan with other investments, either through we have a CDFI here in Huntsville that we partner very closely with, and they do a lot of due diligence on their projects. They're actually helping to manage and oversee our RLF, so we have a really strong partnership there. But yeah, it's tricky, and it kind of remains to be seen. I'll let you know how it goes.
Yeah, I think as long as you go into it with the expectation that some businesses in the tourism sector who really could use the help are a little challenging to underwrite, and there might be difficulty in repayment. And as long as you go in understanding that, and that the funders don't have a different expectation,
Right.
I think that's the way to go. Even perhaps forgiving certain aspects of the loan if that's allowable under the the funding agreement might be good.
Looks like we have a question here for you, Chuck. Chuck, you mentioned implementation as being just as important as planning. How has your regional council engaged in implementation? Do you help secure funding? Do you manage the implementation?
So thank you for the question. We started it's called our Community Enhancements Grant Program. It started out with downtowns and gateways to our small towns and small cities. It was funding that was generated through our small business loan program through SBA. And so at one point we had more servicing fee coming in than our costs. And so we had a reserve, and we decided to reinvest it out in the communities. And now we're poised to start reinvesting that, and we could link that to tourism as well. We've helped people identify good projects and put together funding for implementation. And we don't actually don't actually oversee the construction or permit or anything ourselves. And the reason I bring it up is a great bird blind along the coast with a small picnic area could be transformative, right, for a rural county. And so those are the types of things that we want to get the opportunity for. A little better lighting in the parking lot You know, going to the beach could make a big difference, those types of things. And so right now we have some local funds we can invest into that. We have not been successful in finding traditional grant programs to really help with that. So.
Great. This kind of builds off of it a little bit here. We have another question. I think it's kind of open to the whole group here. Are any of the programs utilizing the National Trust's Cultural Heritage Program and its 8 principles? If so, working with your state's Main Street program to pull it off, ? So I guess that might be a little bit more directed to you, Melissa. Are you familiar with the National Trust Cultural Heritage Program? I'm not super familiar.
I'm not super familiar with that. I know that the Genesee Valley is looking at a national, trying to become a national, I want to say it's a historic region. Yeah, I'm not sure what it is exactly. We're in the midst of that. It's come out to be one of our key strategies, is becoming a national, it might be a national scenic designation. I'm not sure exactly, but we have a group helping us with that too, across this 5-county region, which is, I think typically you go first through the state and then the national. So, but yeah, I'm not as familiar with that one.
Yeah, I'll have to look into that as well. Sorry, Chuck, were you gonna?
Yeah, and I was just going to say we'd maybe not that specific program, but we did, as I mentioned, there was an entity in our region that wanted to pursue kind of a national recreation area designation. The challenge with that is that became such a big goal and so consuming that nothing else really happened in the meantime, right? As far as unifying businesses, even connecting the dots on the map, getting some implementation done. And so this time we're really going to focus, for us, it's really about getting some amenities into a few key strategic areas on the agritourism and the nature tourism approach that could really make a difference for us. Because we have like mission control for NASA, we have sporting events, those types of things. It's these lesser known things that if we can just make those experiences a bit more pleasant, for lack of a better word, for your average person to go enjoy, then we won't have to worry about it, really.
And the asker clarified that it's the National Trust's Cultural Heritage Tourism Program. We that word, sorry about that. But yeah, I think we should all take a look at that and learn more about it. And I know we're over time, but I just have one final question, and it kind of is from both me and Carrie, because we both have small kids that we like to get in the car and drive to our various, regional tourist sites, especially now with COVID, everybody's, looking for those day trips or those staycation, easier opportunities for outdoor recreation and tourism. Was there any, can you shed some light on how you came up with that 1 hour mark? Because I do find that that's about 1 hour, maybe an hour and a half. That's a good travel time to a day trip or an overnight trip. Did you guys do any sort of study for that?
Well, for us, it was really more anecdotal, and also just talking to our local government members. There are second or third tier places as far as quality within an hour that'll get hit all the time for a picnic. But that the 2 hour place or the 2 hour and 15-minute place that is knock your socks off incredible. Kids would love it. Get on that vintage oyster barge I mentioned in the thing. That's a 2 hour and 15-minute each way drive, right? And so until autonomous vehicles get out there, we can just throw yourself and the kids in one of those. It's going to be hard. It's going to be really hard to make that work. But we just stop and talking to people. Oh yeah, here's this thing. Go check it out. And we'd go look at it. And to be honest, I'd kind of go, ooh, wow, I don't know, about this, but it was something, right? It wasn't that great, but it was close enough and it was different enough that people would go have a picnic there or go hang out by the river. So
yeah, I guess in your region, Melissa, you can get to more places, I guess, in a bit of a quicker time, I guess, depending on traffic. But do you find that time, that day trip time frame as well, about an hour?
I think it's an hour and a half here. I mean, it it still takes some time to get places. So, and some of the most interesting places are kind of off the beaten path a little bit.
Yeah.
They're worth going to, but yeah, there's a price.
I would also just add that Galveston and the beach is about an hour away, and the Kima Boardwalk, which is a little more of the amusement recreational area along the coast, that's about an hour, 45 minutes to an hour. So people say, 2 hours to go to this place I don't really know about, or let's just go to the beach, you know. And
known quantity.
Known entity. It's a known.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, in the interest of time, I know we've gone a few minutes over. We'll stop it there. But if anyone has any questions, feel free to follow up with any of us. I really appreciate everyone's time today. Chuck, Melissa, John, thank you all for presenting. This was really great to participate in. I think that's all we have for today, and it concludes the day one of the conference. The 2020 virtual NATO ATC will resume tomorrow morning at 11:30 Eastern or 10:30 Central Time, which is where I am. And it will begin with a plenary session about lessons learned from 2020, and that will help all RDOs shape organizations and workforces for the next 20 years. So not to be missed. Thank you again to our panelists, and thank you to the men and women behind the curtain at NATO that helped us today. So thank you very much. And everyone have a good evening, and we will see everybody back here tomorrow.
Thanks, everybody.
You.
Bye.
Thanks for